For 10,000 years, the rhythm of life followed patterns that seemed eternal. Work began with sunrise and ended with darkness. Energy came from muscle, from animals, from falling water, or from the uncertain generosity of the wind. Production was local. Distance was expensive. Time itself moved at the pace of the seasons.
This video uses AI-assisted visuals to recreate historical scenes for educational purposes. Stay with us as the past returns to life before your eyes.
In the year 1700, a merchant in London lived in a world fundamentally familiar to a merchant in ancient Rome. Tools were handmade. Goods were scarce. Growth was limited by land, labor, and the fragile energy of living bodies. Empires rose and collapsed within that world. Wars reshaped borders. Religions transformed cultures. Yet the underlying structure of daily life remained the same. Then, within the space of just a few generations, that ancient stability broke. Beginning in the mid-18th century, in the coal-rich landscapes of Great Britain, humanity learned to unlock energy stored deep within the earth. Heat and pressure, captured and controlled, began to multiply the power of human labor beyond anything previously imaginable. From around 1760, a transformation began that would alter not only industry, but the structure of society, the geography of nations, and the expectations of civilization itself. Hand production gave way to machines, villages gave way to cities, natural rhythms gave way to mechanical time. This was not simply a technological shift. It was the moment humanity escaped the limits of organic energy. We call it the Industrial Revolution, and once it began, the world would never return to what it had been. On a map of Europe around 1700, Great Britain appears small and peripheral, yet beneath its soil lay the foundations of a transformation. Across northern England, the Midlands, and South Wales, vast seams of coal lay close to the surface. Nearby were deposits of iron ore. Rivers such as the Severn, Trent, and Tyne provided natural transport routes, while deep coastal harbors connected industry to global trade. Geography made large-scale energy possible, but geography alone does not create revolutions. During the early 18th century, Britain underwent an agricultural revolution. New crop rotations, improved drainage, selective breeding, and mechanical seed drills dramatically increased productivity. By the mid-1700s, fewer workers were needed on the land. At the same time, the enclosure movement reorganized common fields into private property, displacing thousands of rural families. A new labor force emerged, mobile, landless, and dependent on wages. Politically, Britain offered something rare: stability. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, property rights were protected and contracts enforced. Investors could risk capital with confidence. Banks expanded. Insurance reduced uncertainty. Patent laws rewarded invention. Beyond the island, a global empire supplied both resources and markets. Cotton flowed from the American colonies and later the American South. Sugar arrived from the Caribbean. Trade routes connected London, Liverpool, and Bristol to ports across the Atlantic and Indian Ocean. Yet one economic fact mattered more than any other. In Britain, labor was expensive. Coal was cheap. For the first time in history, it became economically sensible to replace human effort with machines. The conditions were in place. All that remained was a spark. The transformation began in textiles. In the early 18th century, cloth production followed the domestic system. Families spun thread and wove fabric in their homes across rural Lancashire and Yorkshire. Output was slow, limited by human endurance. But demand was rising rapidly, driven by population growth and expanding global markets. In 1733, John Kay's flying shuttle doubled the speed of weaving. Almost immediately, a bottleneck appeared. Spinners could not produce yarn fast enough to supply the looms. For decades, this imbalance constrained growth. Then came a sequence of inventions. In 1764, Hargreaves created the spinning jenny. In 1769, Arkwright patented the water frame, powered by flowing rivers and too large for cottages. Production moved into centralized mills. In 1779, Samuel Crompton's spinning mule produced thread stronger and finer than hand spinning. These machines did more than increase output. They reorganized labor. Workers gathered under one roof. Production followed fixed schedules. Time became regulated and measurable. Meanwhile, another problem was emerging underground. As coal mining expanded across Northumberland, Durham, and the Black Country, deeper shafts filled with water. Traditional pumping methods failed. The solution would transform industry. In 1712, Newcomen built a steam-powered pump. Decades later, in the 1770s, Watt dramatically improved its efficiency with a separate condenser. By 1776, Watt's engines powered mines, mills, and workshops. For the first time, industry was no longer tied to rivers or wind. Energy had become mobile. Growth accelerated. Between 1750 and 1850, Britain's output expanded at an unprecedented rate. On the map, small market towns transformed into industrial cities. Nowhere was this more visible than in Manchester, whose population rose from under 30,000 in the early 18th century to hundreds of thousands by the mid-19th. Factories lined canals, chimneys darkened the sky. Coal smoke turned daylight into a permanent haze. Urban growth was rapid and largely unplanned. Workers crowded into dense housing, built quickly and cheaply. Streets were narrow, sewage ran in open drains, rivers became conduits for industrial waste. Inside factories, life was governed by the clock. Workdays lasted 12 to 14 hours. Women and children formed a large share of the workforce. Accidents were common. Wages were low. In many industrial districts, life expectancy declined. The Industrial Revolution produced enormous wealth. Britain became the world's leading manufacturing nation. But prosperity was unevenly distributed. The same system that lowered the price of cloth and iron also created new forms of urban poverty and economic dependence. Progress had a cost, and it was paid daily in time, health, and human endurance. Industrialization reshaped society as profoundly as it reshaped industry. A new middle class emerged: factory owners, engineers, merchants, clerks, living in expanding suburbs and consuming goods that once were luxuries. At the same time, a large urban working class depended entirely on wages. Tensions grew. Between 1811 and 1816, textile workers in the Midlands and northern England destroyed machinery in the Luddite uprisings, fearing technological unemployment and the loss of skilled trades. In the following decades, workers organized into trade unions. Strikes spread. Political movements such as Chartism in the 1830s and 40s demanded voting rights and social reform. The Industrial Revolution also transformed ideas. Economists such as Adam Smith and David Ricardo described the new market economy. Social critics documented working conditions. Observing industrial Britain in the 1840s, Karl Marx argued that capitalism produced a deep conflict between labor and capital. Culturally, the Romantic movement reacted against industrialization, mourning the loss of rural landscapes and traditional life. Industrial society had created not only new wealth, but new questions about justice, meaning, and the future of human work. By the mid-19th century, industrialization spread beyond Britain. Across the English Channel, Belgium industrialized rapidly around the coal fields of Wallonia. In France and the Rhine Valley, textile and metal industries expanded.
In Germany, the Ruhr region emerged as a center of heavy industry. Railways accelerated the process. Beginning in the 1830s, rail networks linked cities and created national markets. The opening of the Liverpool-Manchester Railway in 1830 marked a turning point in transport and communication. Across the Atlantic, the United States adopted British technology and added new innovations, including interchangeable parts and large-scale mechanized production. Railroads pushed westward, integrating a continental economy. Further east, following the Meiji Restoration of 1868, Japan undertook rapid industrialization, building factories, shipyards, and modern infrastructure within a single generation. By the late 19th century, a second industrial wave emerged, driven by steel, chemicals, electricity, and petroleum. Industrial civilization had become global. The system that never stopped. The Industrial Revolution was not a single event. It was a turning point in the relationship between humanity and energy. Between 1700 and 1850, population growth accelerated, incomes began to rise steadily, and production expanded beyond the limits that had constrained civilization for millennia. Modern economic growth was born in this period. But the transformation carried lasting consequences. Industrial systems created unprecedented wealth and enduring inequality. Cities expanded, but so did environmental strain. The coal burned in Britain's 18th century furnaces began a process of atmospheric change that continues today. Our working hours, our cities, our global supply chains, and our expectations of constant technological progress all trace their origins to this moment. The world of 1700, slow and local and bounded by nature, did not disappear overnight, but within a few generations it ceased to define human life. The Industrial Revolution did not end. It became the operating system of modern civilization. And every day, in the hum of machines, the glow of cities, and the accelerating movement of the global economy, the momentum of that first coal-fired century continues, still expanding, still reshaping the world, still carrying humanity forward along a path first set in motion more than 2.5 centuries ago.